It's like a blue blazer, okay? The article of clothing itself has next to no personality. You would never think to accessorize anything with a blue blazer, but it helps complete you, right? Like if you have like the right shirt and pants, the blue blazer just completes you. It's never gonna call the most attention, but it like gives your body the right shape or something like that. Like this looks like an archetype of like nice watch. If you were like casting nice watch in a movie, you're like, oh, you look like a nice watch. I think I will hire you as nice watch number 2.
Greetings and welcome to this week's aBlogtoWatch Weekly. We're flying, just the two of us. It's just myself and Ariel. We've left David trying to introduce dive watches to Breguet somewhere in Paris.
I don't think you can have a dinner party with just 2 people. I think that's just dinner.
It's just can you have a party for 2?
No.
But I mean, when you arrive at a restaurant, they say party for 2. No?
Yeah, but that's like restaurant speak for how many people enter the table, you know? It's not like you get a different experience.
You sound like your energy has been sucked out of you this morning, Ariel. I'm going to inject some into you if I have to fly over there to do it. Has it been, perchance, a busy week?
No, it has. I mean, it was several days in Vegas, you know, pretty much up till the sun comes up each night. Just a huge amount of meetings and discussions. I mean, it's a great show for aBlogtoWatch, and it's fun. We met with, you know, every single watch brand at Couture, which was, I think, about a dozen or so. And we saw some new watches that are coming out, which are cool. That was the Citizen Group's chance to really shine. They have Citizen, Bulova, Accutron, Frederic Constant, and Alpina. So between all those, there's like a lot of new watches that they have, and they have a huge space. Shinola had its second year there, so they had a whole little build out with like sort of a mini version of the retail space. Obviously, there's mostly jewelry brands there, and while that's not of direct interest, that does mean there's this large amount of jewelry retailers who get into watches and have very interesting assortments of brands. You meet some retailers and you strike up a conversation. You learn that they have like Tag Heuer and then like 2 independent brands. And it's like there's some very interesting assortments out there. So there's actually the ability now, as someone in Middle America, to stumble upon some cool up-and-coming brands. Norcane is an example of a brand that is there and that you'll find at sort of a wide variety of retailers around America, and they very much have been working very hard. And I think that brands like Norcane really demonstrate that if you put the work into it, going out there, making the relationships with the market, the media, the retailers, the suppliers, trying to do everything correct from all angles of the brand instead of just doing one thing like product or one thing just marketing without product. They're sort of very well-rounded in their approach, and they hustle. They're there working very hard, and it's something that I now appreciate. Years ago, it was told to me, and essentially the summary was the difference between the watch brands that do well and those that don't is how hard they work, right? Because they all have access to pretty good product manufacturing. So it's how many relationships they can develop, how many people they can convince to work with them, how many people they can make their friends, how many people they can make feel important, how much they can spread the love, so to say. And, you know, that oftentimes translates in just huge amounts of hours. Meetings, you know, all day long, partying at night, making everyone feel like you're sort of one of the crew. And in a lot of ways, that's what it takes. So the athleticism required in a lot of ways to succeed in luxury watches. And you see it to a degree in Watches of Wonders. But I think what's different about Las Vegas is that, you know, the meetings and the entertainment do not stop all night because it's in Vegas, right? Like,
yes, exactly.
Geneva is very resistant to any fun.
Yes, the difference between Geneva and Vegas is it's Vegas. So unlike the what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, or whatever the phrase is, it's not staying in Vegas. What did you actually see watch-wise that really took your attention?
Well, it was I think very interesting to see the directions that brands are going, and really right now we're in a conservative era, and I've been through enough cycles now to know exactly what a conservative era means. And a conservative era doesn't necessarily mean they're not making new watches, but what it can mean is they go back and they try to improve old greats. And it's sort of the same thing with movies, right? Like they keep making new movies, but are they going to make an original movie based upon original characters and plot, or are they going to remake an old one? So the watch
Indiana Jones 5.
Yeah. So I think the parallels between how the movie industry and the watch industry thinks and feels about investment in products is quite similar. So Bell & Ross, for example, has a new BR3, and it is, it's a different size than the original BR3, and it's got some slight different shapes and some different naming conventions because they use some different movements and things like that. And I guess it makes sense, but they're like, the BR3 was for 20 years ago, nearly 20 years, well, less than 20 years, 18 years ago now. I don't know. Well, the BR1 came out in about 2004. That was a larger sort of 45, 46 millimeter case. I remember at this point, I think about 45, maybe 46. And the BR3 was down to 42, so still big, but more wearable. And it ended up being a little bit more popular just because of its wearability, even though I still like the BR1. And then Bell & Ross started going off into a bunch of different directions. They had the BR2 Diver, and then you have, now the BR5, and they really went sort of for round watches for a while after that. So now they're returning back to square cases. They feel like it's time to do that, and they've come back out with a new BR3 and uses Solida movements now. So the old naming convention was like BR392, which had an ETA 2892. So now it's like BR3A, which is like the three hand, and then there'll be others. There'll be like the BR3G for GMT, and then P for power reserve. Maybe I don't know all the different complications they're going to end up having. They look good. I think they're a little bit thinner. I don't remember all the tech specs. The straps are great, and that it's paralleled in a lot of other brands where they're sort of looking back at old things. You have Oris, for example, who still has very strong products. Very, very, I would say ambitious price points given their sort of historical comfort levels of where they've been, making watches at. Huge emphasis on their movements, not exclusively, but huge emphasis on the movements that are made exclusively for them. There's a new rather expensive Oris watch coming in the sort of Pro Diver collection. I mean, we'll talk about when the time is right. But it is it's funny because it's not the type of watch in terms of size, in terms of thick specs that people assume the market wants right now. 10 years ago, that was different. There was a much more demand for it. And so I wonder, do these brands see something coming, or do they say, it's been 10 years since something like this is popular? Is it the time again for this brand? They sample. They're like, okay, let's put this one out there, see how it does. And so we'll see. Their Hölstein edition watch, which I guess is some annual, I don't know, editor's choice watch or something like that from Oris that they make. This time they focused on sort of a magenta purple, and everyone's like, why purple? I talked about purple popularity, but obviously the production decision for this had been made beforehand. And what Oris said, which was interesting, was that they just the design department just sort of made this decision. I was like, okay, but what I think is also interesting is that magenta apparently is one of the fashion colors of the year. So right. You could make the argument that someone at Oris saw the fashion trend report and said, okay, well, our watch dial is just going to be the fashion color of the year, which would be a very sort of Swiss decision to make, right? Seems very conservative. Don't really need to make a decision. They won't admit it, but it seems that could be very plausibly what is going on there to decision making. So there's that.
There's an article on the website about this limited edition, the very purple Oris, written by Mike Razak. So go and check out. It certainly is a purple watch. Lots of references to deep purple being made in the comment section. I want to know, Kermit making an appearance in Vegas?
Oh my God. Everywhere. Everywhere. I had forgotten that Kermit the Frog was a Disney property. So with it comes like equal parts rules as there is merchandise.
Right, okay. So there were certain things Kermit was allowed to do and certain things he wasn't. So he wasn't getting the full Vegas experience?
Oh, no. Kermit is not allowed to perform certain behaviors or even suggest that. You can't even suggest that Kermit would do a whole range of acts, apparently, according to Disney. There's a certain behavior that he's supposed to have, and it can't go beyond that.
Now, bear in mind that the first ever Muppet Show was called The Muppet Show Sex and Violence. It did go in a slightly different direction than what it was originally intended.
You're familiar with Disney washing,
yes,
right?
This has been Disney washed. What's that? What's the guy in the States who's having the row with Disney? Is this like, if you were to put him in charge of Kermit, who's the politician that's running for president?
Oh, DeSantis from Florida?
DeSantis, yeah. Is he not the one that's having a row with Disney and all things?
I'm sure he still loves Kermit the Frog. Kermit's not very controversial at all. He's very universally loved.
I think I saw a thing. Did I see that again? This is probably just Elon Musk influencing everything I see on Twitter. But I think I did see a comment that was credited to DeSantis' wife about the fact that his daughter watches Frozen every day, as a kind of we can have a right with Disney, but you're still consuming the product. What does that say? That may be completely untrue.
I mean, politics is a sport I don't play, so as a spectator, I can't always explain everything.
Good stuff. So Kermit was everywhere. Reflections on the watch, the Kermit watch itself.
I mean, it's a green watch.
Is it a popular watch, or is it just a complete zeitgeist that's gone Oris? So much good attention.
I mean, look, it's like everyone has a moment to be like, I remember Kermit. Do I like Kermit? And you're like, sure. And some people apparently like Kermit enough to get a watch with a color which is, highly suggestive Kermit. And one day a month, there's a tiny Kermit face on the dial. And that's Kermit. That's great.
It's quite a slow payback, to be fair. You see Kermit once a month.
I mean, I said, and I think multiple of us have said, maybe even David said on another call when we talked about this, where if every single day of the week had a different facial expression of Kermit, it would have been cool. You could have different characters. That's what Oris said. They said someone said every day of the month have a different one of the Muppets, because apparently there's a great variety of Muppets.
Oh, yeah. Give me the Swedish chef any day of the week.
Yeah, you're not the first person to say it. Yeah.
We have chicken.
Yeah, okay. So Oris reserves the right. Maybe the next year's Hölstein watch is the Swedish chef watch. Who knows? This is them being playful. This is about as much as they can get away with, and that's fine. I think it's great, but I think that we're sold out, right? But they said something interesting. They said, even though it's sold out, that's what they're going to advertise the entire year. They're like, it's like they're not even interested in the other watches. So apparently they feel that this is like a wow message for the brand. And it's great, but I think that, if you're looking for sort of like watch product experience, this is not that. This is a watch we know, which is a nice watch, the Pro Pilot, but with a different color, and one day a month, there's the frog's face. I mean, I would just break the date. Just be like, okay, stay on that day.
Stay there. There has to be a Rolf the dog appear at some stage, bearing in mind that the company is run by a guy called Rolf, who clearly loves the Muppet Show. So I'm holding out for Rolf the dog.
Yeah,
at some point.
Yeah, I can see it now.
So Oris, good. Bell and Ross. I think Bell and Ross might be about to have a wee moment again. They just seem like such an alive company.
Well, it's cyclical, right?
Personalities, the people. I think it's just going to take some A-lister on a red carpet to wear a square Bell and Ross watch, and I think it'll just tip into, Bell and Ross is the it brand right now.
I mean, the problem with Bell & Ross is that it's too practical in its appeal. It's a nice watch at a decent price. It's versatile, it's handsome, but it's not like crazy enough. I mean, like, Richard Mille is at the other end of the spectrum. Like, the designs are pretty out there. The prices are, stratospheric by design. It's hard to get. Like, Bell & Ross has just been making it too easy for people to like it. And I mean, I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but, that's the problem. They're sort of gimmickless. It's just like, we make nice watches, and we're pretty cool about it. And I think that brands like that, again, when Bell & Ross came out in the 1990s, were fantastic because it was part of sort of the exportation of European culture. Like these like cool everyday objects with wonderful designs. The Italians were doing a lot, the Swiss were doing a lot, the French were doing a lot, Germans, of course. There was a big market for their stuff. And it wasn't per se as a luxury item. It was supposed to be as a nice item for people who wanted good stuff and willing to pay extra. It was sort of this sort of audiophile segment where, you pay more for 2-3 percentage points extra quality, but you pay a whole lot more because it just takes that much more. And the average person doesn't really care. And it's kind of the same thing. Like if you just want to know the time, there's things that you can get way lower price, but it's not like you're buying per se gold, diamonds, exclusivity. This type of brand has done well traditionally retail because it's designed for retail, where people actually are thinking practically and want to price shop and be like, well, what's it cost compared to the Omega and the Cartier and the Rolex? Oh, the Bell & Ross it's got got the chronograph at a good price. Like, it thrives in this more rational decision-making environment versus like, this is the one watch to get. I'm hyper focusing on it. I'm not looking to the side at all. Everyone seems to have it online. And this is a sort of viral popularity that can happen with certain objects or brands or ideas online, which is very different than how most consumers tend to shop in a real world environment. So I hope it has its sort of day, but people have to rediscover the brand and its history, and there'd have to be some rallying around some models. I mean, you could probably today get a pre-owned or quote new vintage, no longer made as we call it, Bell & Ross for a really good price. So if you're just someone who like wants a nice watch and can probably find a good deal on it, like, I mean, Bell & Ross is definitely a good place to look.
Yeah, and they are, if you've never tried on, like the BR03 GMT is just one of the most comfy watches to wear because the lug width is designed to effectively be, meaning the strap is more or less the same width as the watch. They're just incredibly comfortable. So if you've ever wondered about trying on a Bell & Ross, don't wonder. Just go down to wherever you buy your watches and try one on. You'll be delighted, and you'll probably have to part with about $4,000, unless, as Ariel says, you go and find something neo vintage. Is that what we're using now? Neo vintage online from Bell & Ross. Citizen Group were there, all guns blazing. Was it worthwhile Citizen focusing on couture rather than saying, guys, we should be at Watches and Wonders? Did standing alone work for them? There's
no question. They are far... I mean, look, remember, this is Citizen USA. This is not Citizen everything. So this serves the purposes of their team very well. Citizen USA is the largest, subsidiary of the main Japanese group. I don't know what their strategy is to see people in other countries. Maybe they just go meet people, but for the United States, Couture is a place that they see their American retailers. Again, huge market, but not the entire world. So they get to have a huge access to tons of retailers. They are a retailer-driven company in terms of their wholesale model. Of course, they sell direct, but that's not the main thing. They get to spend a lot of time. The show, while not cheap, is vastly cheaper and more practical to go to in terms of hotel rooms, comfort, services, things like that.
And it's Vegas, baby.
I mean,
to Geneva.
Your average American, when they go to Vegas, they're not like, oh my God, Vegas. But like, and there's walking, and there's a lot of people. But honestly, it's in terms of the food options, in terms of the amount of hotel rooms, that things are relatively nice and friendly and high energy. I mean, it beats... pretty much every European city. I mean, there's even Europeans now that say things like, we were at the show and they're like, why don't they do Watches and Wonders here? And then they all sort of seem to remember, oh yeah, the Swiss would never want, to do it outside of Switzerland. And part of it is I think they're afraid of the logistics involved in getting the watches out of the country. Oftentimes these watches are made days, hours before the show, and they're, I guess, rightfully concerned that they're going to have issues getting something stuck in customs, and they won't have the watch at the show, and because of that, everyone's got to drag their butts to Geneva. So
there were certainly a couple of brands at Watches and Wonders that I did interviews with before the show started, like literally a few days before, and we had to record two different versions. Because one was, the watch is ready and it's here at the show. Here we go. And the other was, we're looking forward to bringing this watch to you later in the year. So it's very last, which I completely don't understand. Maybe COVID, I can kind of build in a bit of grace to these brands. But how on earth do they have such a big trade show that they know happens every year, pretty much clockwork, baboomch, and yet still be massively late for getting everything ready? Everything just always feels so last minute. Does it feel last minute in the States? Does Couture feel like everybody's running around with their hair on fire, or is it like just chill?
It's pretty chill by comparison. I mean, It's a different vibe for sure. There is, a lot of product there. There's some people say, oh yeah, we don't have this, we don't have that. It's usually because Switzerland or Japan didn't have samples ready. So,
Yeah.
No one was particularly freaked out about it. There was plenty of watches there. Saw a fair share of samples. The Citizen especially has had to make a lot of production priority decisions, I believe. I don't know for sure, but they've come out with watches that they haven't really put into full production yet. Series 8, for example, which is a collection of higher-end mechanical watches at various price points. So they're all high-end, but some are more high-end. Starting just under $1,000 and I think going up to a few thousand. And, a lot of parallels with some of the types of things that Seiko has been popular for. No secret there. But they only made a few Series 8s. Some of the watches they put in the market and they decided to change vastly, especially because a lot of the watches that were meant to do in America, according to some people, weren't designed with American tastes in mind. So they went back and made some moderate redesigns of the watches in sort of the $1,000 to $1,500 levels, I understand, which again is good for consumers. This will probably mean more sellable products. The ones in Japan will naturally be a little bit different, but these watches have not really been big to market yet. So what we're saying is this price point that Seiko was once strong in and has kind of abandoned for $3,000 and up stuff, which again are price points that are a little bit abandoned by the Swiss right now, is now an area where the Citizen Group, especially with the brand Citizen, is saying let's get into with mechanicals. This has nothing to do with them pushing Eco Drive, which they're still going to do heavily, and even more high-end Eco Drive, because Atessa, which is their sort of high-end, some of them are Astron competitors, which Seiko Astron, but they're not all GPS watches, as some of the Atessas are. They're just they're cool. They're high-end watches. They're quartz Eco Drive, but they're high functionality. A few of them came to the US before, was not that popular. Atessa is going to be something that is going to be, again, much more heavily promoted in the United States.
Okay.
They're nice. They're not all for everyone's tastes. I think that Citizen is banking on high-end quartz being a thing. I like high-end quartz a lot. I don't necessarily have as clear of a projection. I think that I agree that high-end electronic watches are definitely going to be very important, but I do think that Citizen has had a very interesting set of priorities around how they design their technology. For example, Casio has introduced Bluetooth in many of its watches. Many of their movements are essentially what you would remember them as, but now with Bluetooth, which helps set the functions and make sure the time's accurate. And that has been very effective, and I think a very good use of technology and clever. I think others should copy that. Seiko hasn't really. Citizen has not. These are companies that have technically Bluetooth-enabled products. Citizen was actually first with the Bluetooth-enabled in the proximity, but it was never a very easy-to-use product, not particularly reliable. Again, very early, and technology was much more nascent, but I haven't necessarily seen them keep on with that. They've been making some amazing watches from an architectural standpoint. The Eco Drive 1. So they have been doing very impressive things. But again, the question goes back to, what does the market want? What do people want to buy? What will capture their attention, their hearts? What complications and features and materials will they want? And Citizen has a number of things going for it.
It's not just what the market wants to buy, but what does the market want to buy from Citizen? I mean, when you say Citizen, you think Eco Drive. If I was to list brands and their standout products, when you got to Citizen, when you got to C in the alphabet, you'd list Eco Drive. You'd then be quite a long time listing other famous ranges of watches before you return to another Citizen range, I think. So what is Citizen's strategy? Are they just trying to be all things? I mean, I suppose the clue's in the name, Citizen. They want to be all things to all people.
I think Citizen, like Seiko, has to make some fundamental shifts in their strategy because the overall number of watches they're producing is less. They are in a world where they have to make as much money, maybe more money if they want, but they're selling less watches. So they don't have volume in their favor as they used to have historically. I think Seiko has been more exposed than Citizen, but Citizen has some of the same issues. And so that naturally means their products, if they're going to charge more for it, they have to deliver more value for the product. And that's something that the Japanese have taken very, very seriously. They're not just trying to charge more for the same, which arguably the Swiss have done without a lot of scrutiny, even though it's sort of a shameless practice for quite some time. Again, you can point out instances here and there, but I think overall they're trying to give you a stronger product in the scheme of things.
So do you think the Series 8 is really where they're going to? Is the, I don't know how you pronounce it, the Tsuyosa, the colour for watches? We're going to get onto Homage watches in a minute, but I suppose you could argue these are kind of Homage watches to what Rolex did a couple of years ago with their coloured dials. Are these Series 8?
No, that's not Series 8. It's different. Again, you have to sort of look at it historically, because Citizen, through Miyota and Seiko, for a very long time, produced a very high volume of very inexpensive automatic movements. They weren't particularly complicated. They weren't that fancy. Many of them didn't have like manually winding, but they sold huge amounts of very inexpensive mechanical watches. I think they had retail prices of like under $200. Many of them were under $100, and they were for parts of the world where mobile phones came late and a lot of people couldn't get watch batteries, and just mechanical watches were preferred. This market eventually stopped because mobile phones hit everywhere and nobody needed their inexpensive mechanical watches anymore. So what ended up happening was then the enthusiast market started to grow and offset, maybe not in volume, but at least in pricing to a degree, the loss in the ultra low-end mechanical market. So then you had Miyota say, this is fantastic. We're gonna ramp up our sale of movements to third parties, which they've always done. So in addition to making movements for Citizen watches, they make it for third parties. And they invested and they made the 9000 series, and they increased in the ability to produce the volume of movements. Now the 9000 series is now the basis of a Le Jour Pareil movement, which again Citizen owns. So they make a version of it in Switzerland with fancier parts, better performance, nicer finishing, but it's essentially a Japanese architecture, which is pretty interesting. And so Citizen recognized that there was going to be a market for selling not low quality or low end, but sort of like entry level, high end mechanical watches, both to themselves, but more importantly, the third market. So what Citizen did was for many years see who is making watches with our movements. What price points are they selling them at? They were studying the market, in my opinion. And between seeing what Seiko is doing, which was again heavily emphasizing mechanical versus quartz, I think they made the decision that now we need to get back into this and we can undercut Seiko because Seiko is now moving to a higher price point. So yes. They hope that this huge world of independent watch brands with all its creativity and all its zeal will capture the minds of young people and and then people will do as they often do and make a practical purchase decision and find something like a Citizen, because I mean for whatever you can say about them, they are an extremely practical choice. And I think that if you want total tech watches, Casio is going to have an advantage in some ways for its daily practicality. If you want to sort of hyper focus on nostalgia, I guess Seiko is going to be there. But Citizen really has a very good sort of middle of the road thing for a lot of people, and in a lot of areas they do the best. So I think that for sort of like your everyday person wanting a practical watch, like I would look to Citizen first.
And what did you make of these I still can't pronounce it. Is it Tsuyosa?
I know what you're saying. I don't remember the actual words, so I'm not going to say it from memory. But you're talking about the ones that are,
Oh, the color dials. So you've
the
got
Jubilee
your blacks,
bracelets.
your blues. Jubilee bracelets.
Was it Jubilee or President Style bracelet? It's a President Style bracelet, right?
Jubilee. Well, I mean, I'm looking at the picture here. I would say it resembled more of a Jubilee bracelet, but it might just be bad photography.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's Rolexy basically.
Yes, it's Rolexy. Yeah, absolutely.
And they're a fair price point. They're trendy. I mean, if you're a watch lover, you might find it a bit on the boring side, unless you're entry level or you're never intending on having a very big of a watch collection. What I think is great about this is if you just need a particular color, the whole point of it was to have these sort of bright, fun colors, and you don't want to spend Rolex money. It's a great way of just getting, that turquoise style. It's still mechanical. It's still conservative looking. It's still nice, but not a lot. And so I think what they're doing is offering like a very easy to accept way of having one of these trendy colors without having to lay out, let's be honest, luxury watch money.
Yeah, and you kind of upgrade from the kind of 300, in the UK it's £300 for these entry level ones, and then you're going up to about £1,000 on average for the Series 8, which are a bit more design orientated, although fundamentally look quite similar. I think it's interesting you point out that these entry-level automatics are taking the place of where Seiko used to sit. Is Citizen directly responding to what their competitors are doing rather than ploughing their own furrow? Because that can be quite risky if your strategy is to do the opposite, or to just try and fill in the gaps from what your competitor leaves.
Look, the planning for products like this requires so much more time and effort to be able to respond that quickly to these types of market changes. What I'm basically saying is that even though Citizens spend a number of years on this product, relatively late in the game, they can make decisions like on pricing and how many different versions they make, right? So they design a bracelet, a case, they figure out what movements they want to use, they do all the engineering, and then they can make cosmetic production number decisions, pricing decisions, very close to the end. And when you look at the price points, you don't necessarily see them following Seiko, but you ask yourself, who else is offering this value? It was once a Seiko. Well, I mean, we know that 10 years ago, when we were talking about a $500 entry-level mechanical watch, Citizen wasn't in this market. They basically abandoned it. They had some mechanical dive watches they hadn't made in a while, and there was a few things here and there, but Citizen wasn't part of this conversation. Seiko benefited from having all these products in the market that they were making in the enthusiast community for now over 25 years, talking about them, giving them names, the tuna, the monster, all these things is because there was this community that would love them for being entry level but of a high quality. And Citizen barely ever benefited from that because it wasn't part of their strategy. So Citizen knows it's going to take some time for that to happen, and they're just trying to have a lot of very commercially palatable stuff. Right? Yeah. Like this is, this takes some design cues from Rolex for sure. This is what Citizen and other Japanese brands have done well for so long. Take aesthetics you like with mechanics that is just hard to disagree with at a price point that just seems really fair. And that's what these are. It's a smart, commercially wise decision. And then when you look into the brand, if this is too boring for you, Citizen has some amazingly original stuff or enthusiast stuff. The new Tsuno chronograph that's coming out in a new style. They're just really cool stuff that they're doing across the board. And this gets attention. The fashion market will love this. The nerds might buy it as gifts, might buy it if they just want to have that yellow dial to go with the suit and they only want to wear it once in a while. So, anyways, yeah.
I'd love to know what colour of suit you're wearing. The yellow watch style's the one that you want.
Well, okay. In fairness, in the marketing pictures that we have on the website, there's this fashion one, and there's this guy wearing like yellow pants and a yellow shirt. So I was just thinking that there's oftentimes a color that you really want to match to an outfit, even though that's not like a color that you find yourself wearing on a regular basis.
Yeah. Citizen website is also a really nice website to use. Considering the amount of watches that they sell, it's actually quite nicely organised, and you can definitely spend a good hour whiling away some time that you probably don't have and should be spending doing something more useful. Just drilling down into the various categories within the Citizen world and seeing watches, and you go, yeah, actually, you know what, $400, that's quite cool. And then you find that you've got a basket full of watches that you don't really need.
Hi, I'm Ariel Adams, founder of aBlogtoWatch, with a message from eBay, a platform I probably use daily. Make sure your watches are the real deal with eBay Authenticity Guarantee. I believe it's the first and best service of its kind that protects your luxury purchases and checks each watch individually at eBay's highly reputable authentication partner, Stolen Company, in the United States. From band to bezel, their authenticators ensure each wristwatch matches the eBay listing and is the real deal. Authenticity Guarantee is also very fast. Once authentication is complete, your watch is securely delivered via rapid 2-day shipping. Surprisingly, eBay's authenticity guarantee service is free for all watches priced $2,000 and up. No one should buy a luxury item without an authenticity guarantee. Do what I do and check eBay before each watch purchase, because everyone deserves real.
We touched briefly on Homage there in referencing these entry-level citizens to a kind of a Rolex copy. Let's talk in more detail about Homages. And Matt, for his Monday article, has written an article called Considering an Homage Watch, Here's Some Food for Thought. Now, when people get into watches, one of the first things, other than looking at AP Royal Oaks and going, I don't like that, why would anybody like that? One of the second comment I hear people make is to do with Homage watches. And it tends to be, why is it that they, whether it be, let's say, Steinhardt or somebody, can copy and do something that looks almost identical to a Rolex Submariner, except it doesn't have Rolex on the dial? Ariel, going back to your trademark days, your attorney days, do you want to fill us in a little bit on why it is, first of all, that companies can produce watches that can look very, very similar to watches that exist, so long as they don't use the actual same logo and try to pass it off? What is it about watches that is so unique that you can that it's allowed that people aren't just suing each other left, right, and centre for copying what we would view as being the same design?
Well, I'm glad you're asking these questions, because the whole subject of homages is huge, and we can discuss it from a variety of angles because there's so much to discuss here. I guess talking about what an homage is and what's legally allowed is important. I think it's easier to say what is not allowed, because most things are allowed. What isn't allowed is copying someone's trademark, right? So trademarks are things like logos and brand names and what they basically call, indicators of origin. So a brand name suggests where something came from. A shape doesn't necessarily suggest where it comes from. Oftentimes a shape can suggest what it does, or is a sort of genericized design, which is owned by society in general, right? Isn't necessarily anyone. It's sort of like the color yellow. It's hard to own yellow. You can do certain things with yellow, but you can't really own yellow. So trademarks are things that you can't copy, and that's why you can make a watch that looks like a Rolex, and if you take the logo off, oftentimes what you've done is okay, and then you put the logo on, and what you've done is now an infringement of trademark. Copyrights gets a little bit more complicated in watches, because copyright is sort of the execution of an idea, and it's mostly thought up as something which is not necessarily a functional object, but a design piece, something which is written, a piece of music, artwork. Those are the types of things where copyright comes in. So copyright can come in certain ways in watches, but when it comes to things that are industrialized, such as watches, it's very rare that you'll see things related to copyright infringement. And I guess that's more people think may come in, like, oh, these designs are owned by somebody. Well, we've carved out an area of the law for the protection of functional things, and that's patent law. And I think what's important to remind people of is, even if you can protect something under patent law, patents expire. And, after a relatively short number of years, patents no longer have any validity. And the way that patent law is designed is you give people exclusivity for a certain amount of time to recoup their investment. And then unless they can sort of patent something else, that now becomes part of the public domain and anyone can use it. There's a lot of things in the watch industry that maybe at some point were patented or patentable, but now are part of the public domain sort of as a consequence of the way that the law works. And so I think that the short answer is pretty much most things about a watch, provided you know how to make it and it doesn't confuse people about origin, you can make.
Yeah, I think fundamentally we need to understand that watches fit into this category that's similar to like screwdrivers. They're engineering tools. They're not viewed as being fundamental pieces of design, despite the fact that us as geeks, geek out on design. they're viewed as being tools, and therefore, as you say, they're not protected normally in the same way as something that you would copyright, like art or a design of something like a chair or something like that. They're protected by the patents that consist of the internal workings of the device. And we've seen patents recently expire for various kind of uses of silicon that have expired and then been quickly adopted by others. The watch that's noted at the start of this article is a very famous watch, the Swiss Icons watch, which Ed Milan from Moser has sworn to me many times was destroyed after it caused such a controversy at Basel World many years ago, I assume. This watch has not been destroyed. It still exists. I saw it at Watches and Wonders, so it's still there. And I really wish somebody would make an homage of this watch, because I would love to own one of these. And this probably demonstrates the parts of watches that are, if you like, copyrightable or trademarkable, such as the Panerai clasp, which if you own a Panerai Mies has like a registered TM stamped on it, and the kind of bezel shape and the colours and the gradients and stuff. But there are actually very few things on the externalities of a watch that you can actually register in such a way that you can protect it. The crown guard being one of those few things. So what do you actually think? I mean, fundamentally are all watches homages to the thing that came before them? And are we just in a particular period of time when it's easy for somebody with a computer and an internet connection to order something that looks a bit like something else from a workshop in China or Hong Kong, whereas 20 years ago, it would actually have taken some smarts to go and build a watch that looked similar to a Rolex Submariner. So it was done by very few people.
So there's a lot of different ways of looking at this. And I guess morality comes into play because, there's a very fine line between a fake and an homage. And, a very small difference in what you're getting can make a big difference, and not just legality, but of course, the morals and the ethics behind what you're doing. Let's be honest, a fake is stealing. You are pretending to be something you're not. It's deception, it's lying. Of course, you're, theoretically taking profits away from the people that own that, and that's a form of theft. So I think that, fake watches are a very real crime. The people that make them and that sell them are criminals. A lot of people have bought fakes. When I was younger, I was in places, I bought fakes out of curiosity. Definitely was not prolific with it. Haven't in a long time and have no interest. I don't particularly like them, but I was in my 20s before, right? So I think that what's important is, yes, they're out there, but I think it doesn't feel good to have them. They're not particularly good, and they're not real. It's a criminal thing. The homage is what you want to do if you can't afford the real thing, but you want to experience the design, you like it. And I think that's where sort of homage comes in. It's are you trying to make people think you have the real one, or do you just like the design a lot and it's just upsetting you can't afford the real one, and you would like a high quality thing that is effectively the same, and society has said, yes, that's fine. And so that's why you have this world of watches that is suggestive of other things, but for me, can be enjoyed as testing whether or not you like the design. And if you do, I think the feeling you should have is, I want the original. So you have a $3 Submariner lookalike and you really like it. I hope you feel, I'd really like an actual Submariner someday.
I am wearing a white dialed Christopher Ward 12 or the 12, which from a distance could be mistaken for any number of other watches of a similar integrated steel sports watch. So an AP, a Laureato, even the Engineer, the new IWC, you could all pretty much lump them into one. But from a distance, when you say, are you wearing it so that other people think? I think so few people other than watch geeks think about watches at all that actually nobody I know is looking at this £1,000 watch thinking, oh, that's a £25,000 AP. Anyone who would know what a £25,000 AP even existed, would be the kind of person that would be able to spot from a distance that this wasn't an AP, and would probably strike up a conversation, a positive conversation about, oh, that's the new Christopher Ward. You know, I think there's such a dividing line between those that care and those that don't, that I don't think there really is this category of people who, when I wear a watch that's an homage to something else, think that it's actually the real Rolex. I mean, there might be a very small overlap with the Submariner, maybe, but I think a large portion of that's probably just invented in our collective watch geek heads. I think most folk don't care, and I think it's only us speaking to ourselves.
What's in our head affects what we buy. And
true, yeah, I'll grant you that.
And remember, to the outside world, it's like, guys, they're just watches. They're, little differences here and there. And for us, like, we agonize over the differences. Yeah. But this hour marker, have you seen this hour marker? And again, like the general public, imagine if somebody was sitting there getting passionate about the design of tire tread on a car. Like, we would be like, I mean, okay, I can get it, but it just seems like not that big of a deal. But like, that's what we do, but even worse. Right? So I think we have to appreciate that what we're looking for is to have a very subjective experience with each of these watches. And the variety of watches means that we can sample a bunch of different emotions, but the way that it's going to make people feel is unique to that person. So I think that it's about enjoyment. I will enjoy wearing an Homage watch more if I'm wearing it because I genuinely am curious about the design or enjoy it or want to know if I'm curious about the design. That's okay. You have to wear it for a while before you can make a decision, versus I'm wearing it because I harbor some desire that other people will think it's something else, even if they don't. You should be thinking, I really want to experience this design and see if it's for me. Because that's the question. Is it for me? I know a lot of other people like it. Will it make me happy too? And that's what I think you should be trying to determine if you are wearing any kind of Homage product.
Yeah. And is the main issue that Homages are actually becoming so good and are priced so much more competitively?
So good at what?
That actually, well, so good at doing what, if you like, the real thing does. Like 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, an Homage watch was considered to be like a beater watch. It was pretty crappy. It looked like the thing from a distance. It would probably not last a year or a couple of years. You wouldn't be able to get it serviced, or you'd be embarrassed to get it serviced. Whereas now watches, which reviews being Homages, are so good that actually I'm looking at this Christopher Ward going, this is £1,000. Is this really 20 times less the watch than the Royal Oak? I'm like, not even, no. I mean, you could absolutely sell this watch with, some extra marketing and, telling a different story for
why is this
5
bad?
times the price.
Why is this a bad thing?
Because it's a bad thing for the brands that hold the originals.
Why?
Well, is it going to eventually just go, well, if I can't get hold of a Rolex, so at the moment you can't get hold of a Submariner, let's say, so you buy the Homage, and then you're like, well, actually this Homage is really good. So when the Rolex becomes available, when you get the call from the dealer going, your Submariner's now here, you can get you one. You're like, you know what? I actually don't want to spend 5 times the price because this is actually really, really good. So is there a risk to the bigger brands? So if you like the intellectual property of the big brands, that as Homages get better, their brand value reduces because the difference that is, get the original, the Swiss watch, the Rolex, the one with the history, the one with the stories, is actually diminished.
Maybe.
The price gap's not as big.
I don't think anyone should feel bad for them. I mean, if you are going to charge top dollar, you actually have to deliver exclusivity. If you can't, your value proposition is void, and eventually the veneer of your brand's luxury status will go away. Luxury brands that maintain their high prices do so because you cannot get a substantially similar thing for the same price. You probably have to pay more. You can't get a better watch than Rolex for a lower price. In many instances, you can't get a better watch than Rolex for a higher price. They really deliver that. If all of a sudden the $500 thing is offering the same, Rolex has to sort of admit defeat or step it up and give you something that you can't get for that lower amount. That's just the way the luxury industry should work and has worked in many ways for thousands of years.
Right, well, we actually did get some feedback to the last couple of episodes when we asked about luxury definitions and about the likes of AP. So a couple of weeks ago, we asked what should the little strap widgety thing on an Ulsi Nardana or a Bulgari be called, and the best answer we got was it should be called the brand adapter. So I quite like that, the idea that that's where you put your brand. On the link, other stuff we had, we did ask, following on from your query, Ariel, about is the Omega Aquaterra GMT really a luxury complication? And 63% of the audience agreed with you that it's not a luxury complication and should never be as expensive as it actually is.
Well, I guess that's a winning approval, right? Like, I don't know that I've got everyone on my side, but I wouldn't have. You elected me into office?
Yeah, exactly. I'm in charge now. I'm in charge of the Swiss watch industry. So AP, if they keep on making Marvel souvenir watches, will it damage the brand? Again, it was a 66% vote said yes, it would. While at the same time, the nomination for which Marvel or Procter & Gamble character should appear in the next AP was the Old Spice guy on a horse was the best nomination as to so the crossover.
They literally just went for the weirdest one. It wasn't like the one that would do the West. They were just this is the joke. This is the joke vote, everyone.
Yeah, this is joke vote. Well, we're gonna give a shout out to everybody for
watch. I'm gonna eat my words. Like, what is he, a Minotaur or something? Like, Minotaurs are gonna like be in or something. There's gonna be a movie about them. I'm gonna be feeling really stupid pretty soon.
Well, Wesley, who suggested that, is a very well-known restaurant critic in Dublin. So thank you, Leslie, for contributing to that. Ariel, just to very quickly want to just mention Superlative. Your most recent episode is with a chap called Roger Peters, from a brand called Hook and Huygens, who I interviewed for Watches and Wonders. And then after I've interviewed him, I said, Arrow, you've got to get this guy on and speak to him for an hour. I think you'll very much enjoy the chat. Now, Hook and Huygens is a bit of a unique brand. It is the original polo watch, the watch with a hole in the middle, whereby you can put basically anything you like. They will make from you. But an interesting character, an interesting chap, master watchmaker himself. What did you get into in the Superlative episode?
I think the most interesting things that people can get out of that particular show was his approach to how he came to decisions, right? When you come up with your own watch, the entire process of making a watch and a brand is so long that you have to commit to things. And there's a ton of decisions that you need to make. You can't make every type of movement. It's got to operate one way. If you make an architecture, there's a bunch of things you need to follow from it. Like, there's so many consequences to every decision you make, and a lot of decisions that need to be made that cannot be reversed. And so rather than just sort of go at it sort of from the artistic angle or from the traditional watchmaker angle, he first studied the outcome of a lot of other people's decisions, and then sort of through a more informed approach came and tried to do what they were trying to do better through the power of seeing where their failures were. And this sort of highly analytical approach to being an independent watchmaker, it's not unprecedented. Obviously, it requires a very intelligent mind to do this, and there are many very, very smart independent watchmakers. But I haven't talked to someone who, in a modern sense, has evaluated the playing field and the decision making and the outcomes of others quite like him. So it's sort of like, I want to come down to it in like another 5 years and be like, okay, so did your plan work? Did it go the way you thought? Was this actually popular? Did it work out the way? Because he's launched now, but I think that there's still a lot of things to determine down the road. So It's a fun concept. I agree that it's cool. I'd like one of those myself. They're not crazy expensive, but these are, of course, luxury watches through and through. And again, 30, 40 years from now, when people look back at his work, I think this conversation will help explain the whys of why people did this. And I think that's what I'm trying to get at in the show. And this is a perfect example of that is, why did you make this? Why did you do it? Who are you? What are you trying to accomplish? Because even if we sympathize with the beauty or the functionality of the item, sometimes the real reason why these products come to life can be extremely mysterious unless you really just pull it out of someone through, interviewing.
Yeah. Cool. We'll go and check out the Superlative podcast for that chat. Ariel, you reviewed the Manta Noble. Now, in light of our previous conversation about Homage watches, does this watch scream Homage, or does it stand alone as its own thing? Manta?
It's not an homage because you don't think of any one watch. I think the hallmark of an homage is, I think of Rolex Explorer, I think of Omega Speedmaster. With the Manta, you see things that you might have seen in another watch, like a tapering on a bracelet, but there's nothing that specifically looks like anything else. It feels like it's an amalgamation of a theme. It feels, if anything, somewhat generic, not in a bad way, but it's not a direct copy of any one thing, in my opinion, at all. And I think that's one of the reasons it sort of succeeds, is that to sort of a regular person, they look at it, they're like, that looks familiar, but it also looks original. And that's not impossible to do. It's harder to do, but I think that's sort of what it looks like. It's familiar, but also original.
I think what this lacks is, it is familiar. I'm not sure it feels terribly original. I'm used to Manta watches, I think, kind of standing out. This doesn't feel like it stands out, especially for the price. Was it a more enjoyable watch just to wear? Because it's not. I'm not looking at it going, yeah, really want to engage with this.
It's like a blue blazer. Okay, The article of clothing itself has next to no personality. You would never think to accessorize anything with a blue blazer, but it helps complete you, right? Like if you have like the right shirt and pants, the blue blazer just completes you. It's never going to call the most attention, but it like gives your body the right shape or something like that. Like this looks like an archetype of like nice watch. If you were like casting nice watch in a movie, you're like, oh, you look like a nice watch. I think I will hire you as nice watch number 2. Like it satisfies that. It's suggestive of things, but no one's going to be like, you copied my design. But it's like, nice watch. And so there is a lot of people that just want the look of a nice watch. It's something they'll wear on a regular basis. Maybe that'll be their everyday watch, and they'll have it every single time they go out. I really think that's what they're trying to excel at, but we've seen artists like that. We've seen artists that are like just sort of an amalgamation of theme. You're like, oh, blurry landscape. Doesn't look like any particular blurry landscape, but it's the genre of blurry landscapes.
Excellent. We'll go check out the article for that. Talking of blurry landscapes, let's deal with a final watch this week. Hands-on with the Casual Calatrava. This is Jake's article, the Patek Philippe 607G or 6007G watch. Ariel, you and me recorded a little episode wandering around the Patek Philippe window, and we kind of looked at watches and we kind of looked at these and we're kind of like, yeah, what's this about? Is this... It feels like they're... I don't know if it feels like they're homaging themselves, because it's not like this resembles anything they've ever made. It's kind of like Fisher Price Patek, but 37 grand. I don't really know what need this watch is fulfilling.
So notice this. This is what's funny about Patek Philippe naming. Even though you've been speaking about it for quite quite a while. If someone listening to this doesn't know already what you're speaking about, they can't even Google search this. You type in Patek Philippe Calatrava, like a bazillion things are going to come up. Like that's how the naming conventions don't work. Like just the numbers don't say anything. Like these are expensive but youthful, so they're white gold. There's a few versions of the same watch which have different color accents. So it's kind of like where any brand comes up with a model and says, and here's our 4 colorways, and they're all $5,000, and they're kind of like just fun sport watches. Like Patek Philippe did that, several colorways, they're like $40,000. It's like in an era where we get really excited about like a really finely finished, as the Manta is, like, $1,700, mechanical 3-hand watch. It's difficult at the exact same time and say, well, there's another individual out there for not much different of a watch wants to spend $40,000 in that 3-hand automatic. And I mean, I have the idea that if you're going to spend money on a brand, it should be because it's something that brand can do that no one else can do. And there's nothing in this watch, arguably, that Patek Philippe can do that no one else can do. And that's why I think people call it a Me Too thing, because there's no brand flexing. They come out with one of their advanced research chronographs that does something slightly different, and they charge like a bunch of money for it. Okay, that's because no one else but Patek Philippe spent that time doing that advanced research. But this is like, well, someone needs to get their yacht serviced in the board of directors, so let's make something a bit commercially successful because we need money now. Like, I'm not saying that's what's happening, but I think that it's not lazy, but it doesn't lead the market. And when a market leader is not leading the market or a category or a segment or art or design, people are left kind of frustrated. They're like, we thought you were the leader. If we can't look to you for what's happening next, who do we look to?
I mean, I'm completely conflicted with this watch because I actually quite like it. But then I think if it had like GLC, then I'd be like, oh yeah, let's really look at this. But it's Patek, and it's just like, I'm so conflicted. I'm really so conflicted about the price of this. The fact that they're pointing out that one of the notable upgrades in this is that it's got hacking seconds. It's like, wait a minute. That's not something to be boasting about. The Christopher Ward that I'm wearing is a hacking seconds movement. The fact that you produce a 37 grand watch and you're boasting about its hacking seconds probably says all you need to know.
Well, it's about time, right, Rick? Hacking seconds. Yeah.
I know, but I still think it's really cool looking. And I think that's the problem. I actually really like the look of this watch. I just like none of the story, none of the branding, none of the history, none of the whys and wherefores. If Patek had produced this as like a steel, proper entry level Patek, like that was $7.5 grand.
It's a slippery slope. The problem is that Patek Philippe can do this every once in a while, but if this becomes routine, which it's starting to look like, then it kind of turns into like Bulova 15, 20 years ago, where it's wait, don't you remember when Bulova was great? Well, look at them now. Oh, that department store crap. Like, that was Bulova for a long time, and then they became so like, not that Patek Philippe is introducing department store pricing, but they are kind of introducing department store product design principles. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And so do we think this in reality is just the service watch you get when you take your grand complication in?
Look, it's going to sell, but if all that Patek does is this, as most of their watches, in a few years, they're going to start to really erode at the brand value. And I think that's the problem with Patek Philippe, is they have the Nautilus, which, other than its sort of exterior personality, doesn't really have that much of a personality within Patek Philippe. Like, Audemars Piguet has made the entire brand personality around the Royal Oak. Like, Patek Philippe is like, yeah, and the Nautilus is this thing we make. Like, we want it to be popular, but not that popular. But they don't really make like a universe around it. There's no like Patek Philippe Nautilus land anywhere, even though they're like, that's what they should be doing with it. So, I think the problem is that, there's not a lot of explanation of what their strategy is or what they're doing. It seems to be quite random and haphazard. And I think that they still need to be having these sort of class-leading products on a regular basis. And when they come out with this sort of commercial stuff, like, that shouldn't be their first foot. Like Citizen, like we're sitting there talking about those colorful dial things. Like Citizen's not being like, check this out. Like that's something that they know it's going to sell. They know the press isn't going to be that excited about it, but it's going to do well and everyone wishes well for it. But they really get excited about like this new Ultra this or this new, several $1,000 one. Like that's how Patek Philippe should be. Like these should be in the background, not really talked about, just like all their quartz ladies watches that make the money. But like when there's nothing else to talk about, like, oh, look at this. It's like Patek, you sleep at the wheel, and maybe that's what's going on. A little bit of sleep at the wheel.
I just don't know what they do with this. They've released this watch. Does it just sit there in the catalogue forever and they kill it? I can't imagine that they can iterate on it, that they can update it in the way they do even the 5711 or any other model line.
There's
whereby
like
there's the next iteration of it.
16.7 million colors. I mean, come on.
Oris, Patek, you need to get together and share your Pantone books with each other, and
just maybe there'll be a Kermit the Frog on there someday.
I was going to say, let's properly break the internet. Sikon, we're reaching out to you. We need you to get one of these Pateks and get it into Kermit the Frog green.
I think for like April Fool's Day, we need to explore what pop culture collaborations Patek Philippe is going to prefer. What toys from when you're growing up are going to show up in the Patek Philippe watch? Is it going to be Cabbage Patch Kids, maybe?
Hot Wheels.
Hot Wheels? No, that's too cool. Way too cool for this
Wheels
joke.
Patek. Is that way too cool?
For this joke, it's got to be really lame.
Oh, right, okay. What was that? Stretch Armstrong.
Okay. You're fired from Patek Philippe's marketing department. How dare you? You're not supposed to stretch our watches.
I'm flying out the window in that chair, as the memes suggest.
It's got to be like Lincoln Logs, okay?
It's going to be what?
Lincoln Logs.
Okay, that sounds very American. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Stackable wooden log, which allows you to make small log cabins. So they're called Lincoln Logs.
Is this like Jenga for...
It's like reverse Jenga, okay? You're not
reverse Jenga. You build it rather than take it down.
You're building a solid structure that you have to apparently saw a doorway in. So you're...
You used to get those kits as kids in school. I don't know if you'd have them in whether it's kindergarten or whatever the equivalent is in the States, whereby it was a big box of little wooden blocks that you would use to learn how to count. Like there'd be one that was 1 by 1 and there'd be like a 1 by 10 and you'd have to do it all. So is that kind of what Lincoln Logs is?
Wait. The sticks that you count? Are you talking about the little balls you move?
No, that's an abacus, Ariel.
Yeah, I know.
No. This was little. I'm probably imagining this. Somebody help me out in the comment section. Some school teacher. It was like the thing you would do on the Friday afternoon when the teacher had given up the will to live for the week and just wanted some peace and quiet and for everybody to go home. She'd break out the blocks and pretend that it was being used for educating you in entry-level maths, and there was little like 1 by 1s and you'd add them up, and I don't know.
Boy, I feel like I left out. I did have counting sticks. I was deprived.
Counting sticks. It's Scotland. We barely had electricity and running water.
Scottish counting sticks.
Scottish counting sticks. Great stuff. Well, that's us for this week. Ariel, what are you up to in the week ahead?
Well, I have to follow up from all the meetings that we had at Couture. We have a lot of exciting things that we're going to be doing. So if just some of the promising discussions we had comes to fruition, we have a lot of exciting things coming towards the end of 2023 and into 2024. We're already planning. So a lot to do, and my team is going to be very, very hard at work. And there's a huge...
That's news to them.
No, I mean, and just for the podcast, I mean, between this show and Superlative, I mean, the number of guests we want to have come on just keeps going up. I keep thinking, how do we have like, the 24-hour watch chat, like a channel you can just tune into, like a Twitch stream where it's just one of us, or some other poor soul on the team is just, okay, it's our 24-hour day marathon. always talking about watches. Doesn't matter what's going on. Turn it on. There's some guy going to be talking about reference numbers. I mean, it could be the ultimate like background ambient thing, to relax his use. This bunch of nerds arguing about minutia.
Watch ASMR. Yeah, cool. Well, if you'd like to join the 24-hour chat channel, is a blog to watch, then go to the website or seek us out on Discord and come and play along with everybody else. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.